Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This will be the first of the project plant videos, and this effectively will be like the benchmark. This is what the plants look like at the start of the project. The frequency with which they get filmed is yet to be decided, but somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks, I think. If I do them every month, it's too often. They will go in sets based on how I water. That's just how it'll end up being. So the sort of shadier, cooler ones will all get done together because I water them all at the same time. So it makes filming easy. The rest of the pots, which is what I'm doing today, may be too big for one video. So it may get split into two. And then there'll be the mounted orchids, which again may be split into two. I may not. I haven't got that far yet, but let's make a start today. First one I've picked up that's on the list is the Oncidium Sotoa. Now, this one has just had a closer inspection. First of all, I've just spent ages trying to get all the dead blooms out from the leaf crevices and the base of the plant, and there were a lot. As you know, it's been blooming very well. There's only 2 spikes left now, but I'm happy they've lasted well. Now, I know this is going to sound daft, but I determined when I potted this that this was the back of the plant. This is where most of the oldest pseudo-bulbs are, shown by a couple of leafless ones, and then everything progressing that way. And from that point forward, most of the bulbs you can see now have matured and bloomed. And then, I think I may have got this right. When it was repotted, I determined that because there was a tiny little sign of a new growth here, I thought, well, this is going to be the lead of the plant. On closer inspection now, today, that, and that are new, immature growths that have yet to bloom. So I think we may be in for a subsequent blooming on this down the line a bit. Looks like the spikes push out when the leaves break away from the pseudo-bulb. That's when the spikes have got, well, they can see daylight at that point, shall we say. So these 3 bulbs here are still enclosed, as I would say. They're still growing, and none of them have bloomed. So I think we may get at least 1 spike per pseudo-bulb here, and with this particular plant, it's often 2, 1 each side. So that's the state of play at the moment. It's nearly finished its set of blooms it had when I bought it. It has 1 new growth just starting and 3 pushing on well. So we can monitor the progress of these 3 and see how many more growths shoot out down the line. So that's what it looks like now. I was going to take stills with the DSLR, and I'm being silly. While the videos are in their raw state, and I'm putting the videos together, they produce excellent snapshots of good quality. So instead of mucking about with 2 cameras, I'll just take some stills from the video. I just need to get a point where I've actually got the whole plant in, and I'm holding the camera still. There we go. So that'll be the still. So that's number 1, Oncidium Sotoa, probably my largest, most vigorous Oncidium type, by far. Now this is the Fusarium plant, so I included this one on the list simply because it has a uniqueness amongst my plants. At least I flippin' hope it does, because it was definitely infected. I did the treatment, that all got filmed and everything, so we're sort of starting from the point at which I would hope it would recover. It's Miltonia Sunset, and there's 3 pieces crammed in this pot. Each has 2 pseudo-bulbs and a new growth. Yeah? And the new growths, we've got 1 here, probably 2.5 inches long. And then we've got another one here, probably just a bit less than that. And then the new growth on this one is 1 inch long. So that's its state of play now. It's had all its treatments, and I'm just hoping that the new growths now push on clean and develop a nice strong root system to go with it. So we'll keep our eye on that one for 2 reasons. Now this is the Miltassia Shelob Tolkien, included by popular request, and quite honestly it is a good plant, but I don't want this list to contain all good plants. You know, it'd be nice to see some struggling plants either go down or get better, if you see what I mean. So it's not all good plants. Now this particular plant hasn't long been repotted, and some of the older roots are already branching. You know, this is the back end of the plant effectively, and there's new root growth or signs of it. So coming round the plant, we've got one little new growth here, about 1 inch long. We have a new growth coming up the centre that's currently about 5 to 6 inches long. That's this one here, right in the middle of the plant. And then coming on round here, we have 2 new growths quite close together, 2 separate leads. The plant's heading off in 2 directions, but they're running in parallel. And this one's about 6 inches long. This one's sort of 4 to 5 inches long. So that's the state of play. There are 4 new growths at different stages, one in the middle of the plant, one just starting. And this is not going to bloom until those mature, so it's a fair way off blooming, this one. It's got a good root system underneath it, and it will, as you can see, start producing a new root system on this plant. Yeah, new roots don't start with the new growths. They start later as the growths push on. So a good time to repot this one is not at the first sign of new growths. Let them grow a bit first. You can see this one here is pushing out its new roots. So is this one. Yeah, so let them get a bit of size if you've got a Shelob Tolkien, and then go very careful and don't break them off, obviously. But yeah, large plant. You know, if you're short on space, this may not be the best one for you. So that's Shelob Tolkien. Now this is an addition to the list, but I was thinking I've actually got quite a few twinkles, even though they're in, you know, they are Oncidiums, and I've already selected the Oncidiums. I've got enough twinkles to warrant having one of those on the list, so the list goes up by 1. And I've chosen the new one simply because I know it's got to be repotted. It's currently in bloom, and at the moment I don't see any new growths, although possibly this little tiny one down here, that looks like a weak one from when the plant was smaller, may not develop. This one here is quite new, but nonetheless it's a plant starting from scratch, so it's a brand new acquisition. It's effectively 1 day old. It needs to come out of the media, so it will get a repot down the line a bit, and it's currently in bloom, so we can follow the progress of how long the blooms last. There's still some unopened buds, yeah, so we can include that as part of the progress, and also the repot into a different media, and then follow its progress from there as far as, you know, subsequent new growths and things are concerned. So that's the reason that one's been added in. I do have quite a few twinkles, and it seems silly to not include one of them, so we'll pick on the new one, and that is Oncidium Twinkle Red Fantasy. Now, this is Miltonia Summer Glory, and recent acquisition. This came from my visit to Ridlington, so back in November, so I've had it about a month, I suppose. Was repotted almost immediately. Basically there are 2 mature bulbs and a nice strong new growth that's just starting its new root system. In the past this has done something rather strange. You can see an old flower spike here in a typical place, and then there's another one that came straight out the top of the plant. So that's unusual. I'll keep our eye on this one. But it's a typical Oncidium type, even though it's a Miltonia. It's Oncidium alliance basically. Obviously quite large pseudobulbs as they mature. Whether this one will get to that size we'll have to wait and see, but if those roots push on nicely then it probably will. But obviously it's been disturbed, so its older roots won't be too happy. It needs a new root system. So we'll see how this one progresses through the seasons. Again, starting from quite a new acquisition. We'll see how we go with that one. Well, this is the Neofinetia that I've included, representing the Vanda alliance. On the grounds the Vandas are too big. I can't get the whole plant in shot, so I've chosen one of the smallest ones. This is Higashidemiyako. It's easy for you to say. Hasn't been potted up like this that long, but already it seems to be doing it a little bit better. There's a new fan started down here, and because I don't pay close attention to it because it doesn't get watered very often, there could be other new growths on here that I'm not sure about. But I suppose the easiest thing is to sort of benchmark this there on the grounds that that is definitely a new growth, so we can watch that one progress as it goes through time. There is a video when I actually potted this up in this manner. You have to dig back for it. It's there somewhere. And basically this is completely hollow. Inside of here is an upside down plastic net pot, which was then wrapped in moss. The roots, which weren't bad, were then spread over the top of that moss, and more moss wrapped round and tied on. If I had the really long strand moss, I wouldn't have needed to tie it. I could have just tucked the ends in, but I haven't got that sort of moss. But I think it should do quite well potted up like that, because it needs a wet-dry cycle, and it does need to stay quite dry through the winter. Now, I've just watered that for the first time in over 2 weeks. And it was very dry, so it's had a bit of a soak now, and then it won't get watered again for some considerable time. With the lower temperatures and moss, obviously it takes a while to dry, and in the winter time that's not ideal, but in the summertime I think this is going to take off. And it has bloomed a couple of times. I think it actually bloomed earlier this year, just one spike with a couple of blooms on. Anyway, that's the Neofinetia falcata, now classified as Vanda, but not in my place it's not. Now this is the Aliceara Sunday Best Pink Skirt, and the reason this one's been chosen is a while ago I repotted a lot of Oncidium types that were in a suitable point in their growth cycle to repot, that were in larger pots. And they basically got taken out and put in much smaller pots. And this pot is a little larger than I would have liked, but it wouldn't go in the next size down that I've got. What I need is some pots in between this one and the small one, which would have suited it better. But nonetheless, it was at a point in time when the new growth was pushing out new roots, ideal, and it's in a much smaller pot than it was in before. Effectively, you've got a leafless back bulb on there, 2 other mature bulbs that are full size and leaved, and the latest new growth pushing on quite strong, and it's now starting a new root system. So we'll keep our eye on the fact that hardly any roots show in the pot, because the older roots got moved towards the centre. The new roots will push down the side, so we can keep our eye on the progress of not only that new growth, but the new root system it's about to generate. So that'll be quite nice to watch, that one. And if it blooms, it'll be stunning. That's the whole reason I've kept this plant so long, trying to rescue it. But I think it's going to do much, much better now it's potted up in that media, in that size pot, with a strong new growth and about to produce a brand new root system. We'll see how that one does. Now, I've chosen this one for several reasons. One, it's a biggie. And 2, this is one that I took out of a larger pot because the roots weren't doing too well and put it in a smaller pot not too long ago. It was at a suitable point, and I think I can rest my case. Much, much better root system than it's probably ever had before. Now this is a bit of a monster, lovely strong new growth, which is the main reason it's now progressing a good root system. You've got 2 older bulbs on here. The oldest one's got a bit of spotting on the leaves. Those leaves will probably drop during next season anyway. The leaves on the next bulb round are nice and clean, spotless, literally. And obviously there's no spotting on the new growth at the moment. So we'll see how that one progresses. And the reason I've chosen this, that it is highly likely to bloom on that growth. And the spikes on this thing are a monster. They can be well over a metre long and have 40 or 50 blooms on them. And they're so strong, I mean, I can show you the base of the previous spike. They stick straight upright, no staking, they're self-supporting. So it'll be fun to see that spike, if it produces one, progress from its start point down in here somewhere, up to about a metre or more long, and then watch it branch and all the buds start to form and eventually open. So that will have interest for several different reasons as far as an Oncidium alliance. And that's, I forget what its actual front name is, Oncostele Catatante. And it may not be Oncostele anymore, but it is on my tag. So that's that one, and now it's raining. Marvellous. Now this is Dendrobium Prima Donna, which is a nobile type. This one got interrupted. I mean, this was a specimen-sized plant earlier in the year, and possibly a bit late in the year it got split, and this section got repotted. And these are the consequences of doing that later in the year. You have to bear in mind we had an incredibly cold spring. So a combination of a repot and a late start to the growing season, these are this year's growths, and they are undersized and they've finished growing, so they're not going to get any bigger. But nonetheless, they produced a new root system which will now put the strength back into this plant come the spring, when it can get its new growths off to a really good start, hopefully without having a freezing cold spring. I will have sacrificed a mass blooming on this, but we will get some. Whether these new canes will bloom this spring or wait till next time round, and occasionally this has a flush of blooms in the middle of the summer, but on some of the older canes there are a few nubbins, so we will get some blooms. But it certainly won't be the mass blooming it was at the start of this year. And some of these older canes, yeah, it looks like they'll produce. Once a node has produced a spike on a nobile, it won't ever bloom from that point again. But it will pick up on those it missed out on the time before, if you see what I mean, like here. See, we had a spike there and one there, but this node got missed. Well, that's going to bloom this time round. Same down here, there's a lower one here that's going to shoot out, as well as the ones right up the top. So all is not lost. That's the largest new growth it put up this year, and it's undersized, about 2/3 the size it should be. But it's nice and fat and did its roots thing. That was the important thing. So as far as the growths this season are concerned, we've got one here, 2, little dumpy one here, 3, 4, 5. So it has produced 5 new growths this season. Yeah, so those have all finished growing. Yes, they've all finished growing. They won't get any larger, any longer. They may bloom, they may not. But this plant's future is next year, not this year. This year it's been recovering and trying to get some new growth going again. Next year the cane should start earlier and be that tall. Off the top of the camera probably. So anyway, that's the nobile representative. Blooms are gorgeous, well worth keeping, and if you can ever get hold of it, it's worth having. But it is it does grow big. That's why it had to be split. It's just outgrown its welcome. Just got too big for its boots. Anyway, progressing. Okay, I'm going to split that one off there. So this will have to be part 1A and part 1B will be the rest of the clips that I did during this watering session. So ordinary pots split into 2, which means the videos are comfortable length, and it still gives me chance to have a reasonable chat about each plant. So part 2 will be the rest of this session, coming soon. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.